Before zombies, before The Walking Dead, there was a disease so terrifying it turned living people into decaying corpses. This isn't a horror movie, this is real history, and it all began with an invasion. The year is 1494. The French army, led by King Charles VIII, marches into Naples. They conquer the city with ease, but what they unleash upon their return is far deadlier than any sword. They bring back a disease, a terrifying new plague that sweeps across Europe like wildfire. We know it today as syphilis, but this was no ordinary strain. This was the Great Pox, and its effects were swift and brutal. Imagine a world where people don't just get sick and die. Imagine they rot while they are still alive. This was the reality of the Great Pox. It started with sores, painful pustules that covered the body from head to toe. Then came the fever, the agonizing aches in the bones and muscles that felt like your skeleton was trying to break free. But that was just the beginning. As the disease progressed, the real horror began. The flesh on people's faces would start to decay. Their skin would literally rot away, exposing the muscle and bone underneath. Noses would collapse and fall off, leaving gaping holes in the middle of their faces. Lips would disintegrate. Palates would erode, making it impossible to speak or eat properly. Their hair would fall out in clumps. Their voices would turn into hoarse whispers. They were living, breathing, suffering human beings, but they looked like monsters from a nightmare. Unlike a quick plague that killed in days, syphilis was a slow, agonizing torment. Victims could live for years, sometimes even decades, in this state of living decay. They were walking corpses, shunned by society, forced to hide their disfigured faces behind masks or veils. Can you picture it? Entire cities in Renaissance Europe, cities we think of as centers of art and culture, were also home to these shadow populations. People shuffling through the streets, their bodies falling apart piece by piece, their eyes filled with the pain we can barely comprehend. Doctors at the time were baffled. They had no idea what caused this horrific affliction. They called it the French disease, the Neapolitan disease, the Spanish sickness. Everyone blamed someone else. They tried everything to cure it. They bled patients, they prescribed bizarre herbal concoctions, they even used mercury, a toxic heavy metal. The treatment was often as terrible as the disease itself. Patients would be locked in hot rooms, slathered in mercury ointment, and forced to sweat for days. Many died from mercury poisoning, their bodies racked with tremors and their minds lost to madness. The saying, "One night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury," became a grim reality for countless souls. The social impact was devastating. The disease was so terrifying and so closely linked with sexuality that it created a wave of moral panic across the continent. It changed art, it changed medicine, it changed how people thought about love, sin, and death. Artists of the time, like Albrecht Dürer, created chilling depictions of syphilitic sufferers, their woodcuts capturing the raw horror and despair of the victims. These weren't just medical illustrations. They were powerful commentaries on the fragility of human life. So where did this zombie plague come from? The most widely accepted theory is the Columbian Exchange. When Christopher Columbus and his crew returned from the Americas, they didn't just bring back potatoes and tomatoes. They may have also brought back the bacteria that causes syphilis. In the Americas, the disease had existed for centuries, but the native populations had developed some immunity. For Europeans, whose immune systems had never encountered it, it was a biological bombshell. The bacteria ran rampant, causing the extreme flesh-eating symptoms that defined the Great Pox. Over the centuries, something fascinating happened. The disease and its human hosts entered into a kind of evolutionary truce. Syphilis that killed its host too quickly couldn't spread as effectively. milder strains, which allowed the host to live longer and infect more people, became more common. So, the disease evolved to become less overtly horrific. It became the slower, more insidious disease we know today, one that can still be deadly if left untreated, but which no longer turns its victims into walking, decaying figures on the street. The next time you watch a zombie movie, remember the real-life horror of the Great Pox. Remember the cities filled with people whose bodies were rotting, while their hearts were still beating. It wasn't magic, it wasn't a curse, and it wasn't fiction. It was a terrifying chapter of our own history, a stark reminder of the devastating power of disease. The stories of these sufferers have been largely forgotten, overshadowed by plagues that killed more quickly. But their slow, agonizing fate is perhaps one of the most horrifying tales history has to tell. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this dive into dark history as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories you were never told in school. See you next time.